really embrace the days that suck, right? So if I'm out there and it just sucks today, it's heavy, it's 85 degrees humid, and I'm just slogging through this thing, yes, because you know what? That's how I'm going to feel the last 2 or 3 miles of my race.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, whose favorite TV series was White Collar, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 119 of the Running for Real podcast. Welcome to day 2 of Mental Training Week. Yesterday, we heard just one fascinating story of turning your life around. One of the honestly greatest stories of redemption I've ever heard from Damon West. Now, this week, as you may have noticed yesterday, is 7 episodes in 7 days with sports psychologists, motivational speakers, and they're going to give us a kick to actually work on that mental training game we keep talking about. I've managed to get psychologists who are at the top of their game, and honestly, I'm surprised some of them said yes to the show. I made sure they're all either runners or they're closely tied to running in some way, and each of them have something unique to offer. Now, today begins the first episode of 5 from this week that I have my guests answer the same questions in the middle of the interview. My hope is that each of them brings a different approach to handling the mental training aspect of running, and then you can take the strategies that they give you and see which ones work for you. And then maybe re-listen in a few months or years and see if any of the tactics work better for you at this time. I know personally my kind of tactics change throughout the years. These are the questions I hear from you over and over, and I think they're the big concern for us as runners. Now, today, I'm very excited to bring you the director of the Mental Skills Program for the Chicago Cubs. No big deal, but really it actually is. This guy is a big deal, and he has some advice to match it. I was excited to hear that he was a runner and someone who actually gets a lot of the struggles we go through, and he could speak to them based on what he had learned. Before we meet Josh, I'd just like to send a special thank you to Athletic Greens and Coros for sponsoring this episode. I'm really excited, and I mean that, really excited to be partnering with both of these companies. I've told you a little bit about Coros already, my new favorite GPS watch, and if you get yourself one, I suspect it will become yours too. I'll tell you a little bit more about how it lured me away from the brand you all know I used before later in the show. But for now, go visit tinamuir.com/Coros. That's TINAMUIR.com/COROS to find out more. And you can also check my social media if you want to see it. You'll notice that I've been wearing it for all of my runs. And I did wear it in the Boston Marathon, and I loved it. More soon, but let's go meet Josh. Josh, thank you so much for joining me on the Running for Real podcast. I am really excited for us to pick your brain this morning. Thank you for giving us some time to sit here with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure, Tina. Thanks for reaching out and getting a hold of me. I love it. It's, running is an absolute passion of mine. I've been running since I was probably about, 10 years old. It was my first competitive race. So I love it, and I'm excited to help out.
So first competitive race. So you started competing pretty much straight away then?
Yeah, it was funny. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a 5th grade. We were in 5th grade, and we had a 2-mile run. And at the time, my dad was running marathons, and he had this watch, and the watch was like an old Timex watch, and it had a little beeper pacer on it. So it was like beep, 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 and every time the beep would go, you would run. And he knew a bunch of 10-year-olds were just going to sprint to the front, because they're all excited to run. So he's like, "Here, you're wearing the watch. Just run to the beep." No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Ended up running like a 2-mile, 15-minute 2 miles at 10 years old, and won my first race. And pretty much that was the last race I ever won, but it was awesome.
But he taught you to pace from day one, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
And that's something that a lot of people even now struggle with. But well done to your dad for making you do that. Although I'm not sure whether at the time you were very happy with him when everyone else disappeared off into the distance. And
No, we had the whole plan. We knew exactly what was going to happen. He was like, "Look," because it was like around a big field in the back of the school, and so we knew what was going to happen. He was like, "You're going to pass all these guys. You're going to pass them multiple times because they're all going to just start walking. So just keep with the pacer." And sure enough,
I love that. That's so cool. And we can obviously get into your running. I actually want to hear a little bit about it. But before I begin, just for anyone who doesn't know, I gave a bit of info about Josh in the intro, but being the director of the mental skills program for the Chicago Cubs since 2014, which is a baseball team for anyone who's international. Because if you'd have told me that before I lived in the US, I wouldn't have known what that meant. But tell us, what does that even mean, director of the mental skills program?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, there's not a lot of running in baseball, so it's kind of funny. I'm on a running podcast. Because literally, they were running 90 feet at a time. Or
did you tell them you were coming on this?
I don't know. Maybe. No, they don't know. But so in the game of baseball, it's a big start and stop game. Think about tennis. You think about golf. Those are start stop games where there's a break in between action. And what ends up happening in baseball specifically from the hitting side is there's going to be a ton of failure. You can do everything right, and you're just going to fail 7 out of 10 times. So there's a big mental game to it. There's a big mental component, especially even on the pitching side and the defensive side, where you're standing out there. The pitchers stand out there on a mound alone above everybody else, and they have to, perform. They have to throw a baseball past the guy who's trying to hit it, and the same difference. So my job is we have a whole staff. We have 6 people on our staff total. We have 300 players under our watch at any one time. Most people think of, Chicago Cubs, there's just 25 guys at the major league level. Well, there's a whole feeder system. There's different teams. There's AA, AAA, high A, low A, Arizona, Dominican, and then short season. So there's 9 teams total that we have to kind of take part in. And we have athletes from ages 15 through, guys who are in their late 30s. So we run the gamut, and so we have a staff of 6, and we really are focused on really helping the players access the ability to stay in the moment and to stay present. I think that's our biggest job is how do you eliminate the distractions? How do you clean the whiteboard? How do you just stay here in this particular instance? Because the technical skill required to be successful at this game is so high that you have to be clean in the mind. You have to be clear. You have to have, everything working for you in order to be highly successful.
Wow, that's really interesting. And there's so many things I want to ask you based on what you said there. But the first one that came to mind, so you mentioned about them being present in the moment, which I'm sure you've noticed is a very kind of in thing to talk about, being present, being mindful. So would you say those players, because of working on that with you, are they typically better at being in the present outside of this? Like when they're with their families, they're really present. They're not thinking about the game. They're not thinking about their phones. Do you see it bleed off into other areas that once you kind of get that down, you can do it in other areas, or do they still kind of struggle with that as much as everyone else?
Yeah. So mindfulness and the practice of is meditation, right? So that meditation is a practice. Mindfulness is the outcome. And when you practice meditation and you work at it, it will show up in other aspects of your life without a doubt. The question is, how often do you work at it? Right. And so that's kind of the big thing is daily practice. We kind of incorporate it into the player's world as if it's just another thing, like hitting, like batting practice or doing their warm-up throws or stretching. It's just another way to kind of get themselves ready on the day and to train their mind, to be completely honest with you. So yes, I think one of the big things though is decompression, right? Leaving the game, at the Chicago level, at the highest level. I mean, there's 35, 40,000 people a game watching them, and there's intensity, and it's almost like a drug in a lot of ways. Just the environment, the excitement of the moment, the energy of the crowd. And so how do you kind of shut that off and then move on to being a family person, going and being your dad and things of that nature? And that's definitely a big component of what we do, is helping them separate and helping them decompress.
Yeah, really interesting. And I want to ask you about failure as well, particularly because you mentioned that having to learn to deal with failure. I'm sure you've picked up some really great things along the way. And I'm sure from being a runner yourself, well, actually everyone kind of beats themselves up about failure, but runners in particular feel a lot of the time like if a race doesn't go how they hoped it would, that it was a failure. And so I want to get onto that. But before we do that, just for one more question about you. What was it about the mental side of sports? Was that something you knew you wanted to do early on in school and life, or was it you fall into it?
A lot of people have heard me talk before, and I kind of tell the same story. But I went to the University of Rhode Island, and I got a bachelor's degree in sociology. So I was a waiter for 10 straight years, and I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do with my life. Right. So that actually was a fateful mountain bike ride that kind of clicked me into it. And then I was just on a mountain bike ride, and there was this like section of the ride that I had done hundreds of times in the past, but for some reason I couldn't get through it that day. It was just a bridge over a stream. For some reason, the fear kept coming into my mind, and I would stop and I would brake. I would stop. I would brake. I would stop, and I couldn't get across this bridge. And then it kind of hit me. It was the way I was thinking about it. I was telling myself I could do it, but it wasn't about doing it. I had forgotten the process of doing it. And so once I remembered the process, I was able to really easily get across the bridge and do something I had done hundreds of times before. So in that moment, I was like, wow, this could be really cool to study, because it was nice being a waiter and it was fun, but I wanted something more. And so once I did that, once I got across the bridge and I kind of had this reality, I went back and I looked into what if there was a field of psychology that was specifically on performance and specifically in sports. And sure enough, there was. And so then I went down that path and studied it. And
how did you get from there to becoming the mental skills program director for the Cubs? Pretty big swing there. Yeah, going from a mountain bike ride in Pleasantville, New York, to being the director of mental skills of the Chicago Cubs. Well, the story is, I was waiting tables in New York City, and it was fine, right? And I have a lot of friends from that era who have done incredibly well in the restaurant world in New York City. You can do things, you can create restaurants, you meet a ton of people, so they have amazing lives. But for me, again, I wanted to have a different impact. They're having impact, but I wanted a different impact, and so. What I did is I went back to school. Like I said, I'd gone to the University of Rhode Island, and I had a degree in sociology, but sociology wasn't going to get you into the master's programs for this. So I needed to go back to school, and I had to get a degree. I had to take 20 credits of physical education. So I did that at Brooklyn College out in Flatbush Avenue. And I always tell the joke that I took the 2 train. I was living on the Upper West Side. So you take the 2 train out to Flatbush Avenue. It goes uphill both ways, so it's like, it takes like an hour and a half to get out there. But so I was doing that, waiting tables, and I did 20 credits of that. And then I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York and lived through one winter in Ithaca. And I was like, no way, I'm out of here. But I did all my coursework and then wrote a thesis and got my master's degree. During that time, I applied for an internship down at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. So I spent a summer in Bradenton, Florida doing my internship. I eventually got hired by IMG. And I was there for 10 years. Great. At the Academy. And the Academy is a really unique, crazy place where if you don't know about it, you can just go online and take a look at it. But it's, youth sports. So it's, 12 to 19-year-old kids in tennis, basketball, baseball, soccer, golf, track and field, lacrosse, and American football. So there's just a ton of sports there, and it's basically the kids go to school from probably about 8 till noon, and then from noon till about 7 they're doing their sport. Wow. So it's a pretty intense place, and you learn really quickly. I was on stage, doing mental skills 15, 20 times a week, 45 minutes a pop, just standing up there lecturing and teaching these kids, and then you had a bunch of individual clients as well. Wow. So it was an incredible experience. So after about 7 years of that, though, I realized I probably needed to make a move, and I just wanted something different. And luckily enough, it took about 3 years, but bouncing off of people that I knew in baseball and who I had come in contact with, eventually the Chicago Cubs had called me, and, it worked out. We kind of fit. I'm a little bit crazy. You can tell by my long hair and my crazy beard that I'm not the most kempt person. I'm a little bit, fly by the seat of my pants. And so that's the way they were too at that particular point in 2014. So it was just kind of a match. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Although I kind of wish the story was you were waiting a table and a baseball player came in and you somehow changed his life by he was telling you about a problem and you solved it for him. And then he said, you got to bring this guy on. And then they called the restaurant up and asked for you or something. I wish that was the story, but it's okay. That was a close second, your story you shared. Well, thank you. But it's funny too, because it's like, that's the movie issue. Yeah, it is. Right. But that's not reality. Yeah. And as you know, as a runner, like you don't just show up at the race and win the race, right? No, man, it's hard work. It's day in, day out. It's grinding. It's learning from everything that you messed up. It's getting better every day. It's challenging yourself. It's finding new ways to look at things. I mean, that's the whole game. Yep. Yep.
So, I mean,
that.
that's, I think our story is better. I like
that's true. That's true. This is the real thing. This is running for real. So we have to stick with the real one. All right. So just going back to your running for a bit, you mentioned you started in 5th grade, just loved it straight away. But what have you noticed about runners or running when it comes to the mental side of things? Is there anything in particular that stands out to you that you've noticed that maybe runners do that maybe other sports don't do, or that runners don't do that other sports do?
Well, I think, it's so funny. I always have like my best ideas when I'm running, right? So I don't know if it's the endorphin release or whatever it is, but there's just comes a clarity when you're out on a run. Just things kind of like fade away to the background. That's why I never understood why people run with music on. Because it's like, I mean, like, I know, I get it. I mean, I understand why people run with music on, but for me, I've never run with music. I can't do it because I just want to be present in the run. I want to hear my breathing. I want to hear my own thoughts. I want to smell the air. I want to see what's going on out there. Like this morning, I was running over Siesta Key Bridge. I live in Sarasota, Florida, and there's dolphins swimming around. I actually heard the dolphins breaking the water, right? It's so cool. In moments like that, you don't get anywhere else. I feel like sometimes, right? Where you can just be, you can be there. So I think for me, like for me, I know personally, running is it's a meditation. It's an escape. It's a connection with the self, more so than anything else I've ever done. And again, I think maybe it's because, I've been doing it for so long, but the other part of it too, is one thing I do notice about runners is that, I was thinking about it this morning, knowing I was going to come on today, and like feelings, right? Like I think there's a sense of understanding that feelings are a choice when you become a runner, because you go out there and you're not going to feel good every day when you run. But a lot of times we don't let that decide how we're going to go. We just slug through it, or we just go, because it's just, hey, this is what we're doing. Hey, I got 5 miles on the calendar today. I'm going to bang this off, right? There's something to accomplish. And so whether I'm feeling good or feeling bad, it never really matters. It's just, I'm going to get through this thing. So I think that's a huge aspect of runners. There's a determination, a focus, a willingness to push aside whether or not I feel great or don't feel great. I'm just going to get the job done.
Thank you to Athletic Greens for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Friends, I was so excited to be able to connect with this brand, to work with them, and I've been blown away by what they offer already. You know those super healthy people who wake up every morning, put all kinds of vegetables and fruits into a juicer, blend it all up and drink it as they start their day with perfectly behaved kids, or they're business people at the top of their game. They appear not to have a care in the world. Well, by now you know I'm not one of those people. But since having Bailey, I have noticed that I've really been lacking in the vegetable department. And as she brings a lot of sickness in the house, I noticed I was getting sick too and just feeling a bit run down. I'd always wanted to be one of those juicer people, but not only did I not have a juicer, but I just did not want to clean it up. Way too much work. But this is where Athletics Greens comes along. I've been using it for nearly 2 months now, and I've been absolutely shocked with how easy it fit into my morning routine. I wake up, go downstairs, pour 12 ounces of water in my shaker, add a scoop of Athletic Greens and drink it down, knowing I'm giving my body 75 proven vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients. So even if my lunch might consist of a Generation UCAN with some chips and sweet tea, I know I have at least got some nutrition packed in there. And friends, it does taste good. I know it's hard to believe with a green drink like that, but it really does. I quite enjoy the taste. You can get a free travel pack with 20 days of servings valued at $79 with your first purchase. Visit athleticgreens.com/Tina. That's athleticgreens.com/Tina to get your free travel pack and sign yourself up. I am loving it. I have a feeling you will too.
You go out there and you're not going to feel good every day when you run. But a lot of times we don't let that decide how we're going to go. We just slug through it, or we just go, because it's just, hey, this is what we're doing. Hey, I got 5 miles on the calendar today. I'm going to bang this off, right? There's something to accomplish. And so whether I'm feeling good or feeling bad, it never really matters. It's just, I'm going to get through this thing. So I think that's a huge aspect of runners. There's a determination, a focus, a willingness to push aside whether or not I feel great or don't feel great. I'm just going to get the job done.
Do you think any part of that is just because we know what's coming at the other end? like the feel good endorphins that maybe other sports don't get it like quite so intensely just by doing it. Like I get it if you like win a game or you are successful in something, but there are a few sports that kind of bring that sudden like rush of endorphins. Do you think that's the case? I mean, what do you think?
I don't know. That's a great question. For me, I know it's personally just accomplishment, right? Mm-hmm. Like I set out to do something and I did it.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's like, that's great. Like think about this, like as runners, you guys all know this. The day you decide, I'm just not up for it today, I'm not going to go running. What do you notice that day as you go out about your day? You notice every other person on the street running, right? I mean, does that happen to you, Tina?
Yeah,
like you're just like, I'm not going to go for a run today. And then you look outside, like everybody else is running. You're like, I should have gone running. And it's like weight on your shoulders,
That's
right?
So true.
It's so funny.
I say that to people all the time when they say about, like my sister used to say she didn't want to go running because she didn't want other people to see her. Or like other people say this all the time. And I say, do you know, they're either not going to notice you because they're not a runner, they don't care about running, and they didn't even notice you were there. B, they're going to be looking at you like, wow, look at them, like they're cute. Or C, they're going to be another runner who's going to be thinking, damn, I want to run. Even if they ran that morning, they're like, I should be out there. It's such a nice day. Or like, oh, that person's so tough being out there in the rain, or whatever it is. So yeah, you're exactly right. So
yes,
good to hear you say that. Right. Before we get on to these main questions, one thing I loved reading about you is that, you have this 6-person team. You offer all kinds of different exercises and things that you do with the players. But you said your overriding philosophy is that you want to make better humans because they make better players. So what gave you the idea to kind of think about it in this way? Because I love that concept, and that's the way my husband, who coaches, very much takes his approach to coaching college athletes. But why think of it that way rather than kind of backing into it like most people would?
Well, because we're humans first, right? Mm-hmm. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? We're not human doings, we're human beings. And so like that is, like guys do baseball, people do running, right? But that's not who is the essential, that's not who our being is, right? And so that's the big key for us is always that, like, we have to start with the human. And then the performance stuff we'll get to, but that's who you always, that's the way it always has to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe it's like a humanistic approach or something of that nature, but I think when you look at the whole person, a guy standing in the batter's box, he's probably going to have a million different thoughts going through his head. But if it's a bunch of stuff off the field, it's a bunch of like guilt, if it's a bunch of this, if it's a bunch of that, then he's not going to be able to focus on the performance. So you have to get them clean in terms of who they are as a person first. It's kind of identity formation type stuff, right? And so if they know who they are as a person, then, a lot of times what happens with athletes is they can't separate. We just talked about decompression before. There's a how do you separate being a baseball player and being a father? How do you separate, like your identity? Are you still a good person if I strike out 5 times? Yeah, you probably are, like that's just your performance that day. So, but yes, it matters, right? There's 40,000 people watching you. There's millions of people who are Cubs fans and they want you to be successful, and let alone freaking, social media. I mean, it's just, it's an intense world out there on social media. People in their basements just ripping off, firing stuff at people, telling them how horrible they are as a human being. They don't even know them just because they didn't perform that day.
That's always been one of my biggest pet peeves when people do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I remember a couple of years ago, one of our minor leaguers was talking about how great it would be just to go into an office, somebody's office, and as they're like on their computer, like doing their spreadsheets, like screaming at them, being like, "Hey, don't screw this up! Oh, is that cell in the right place? Look out! Did you copy paste right? Oh, you used the wrong finger!" Just like screaming at them. I thought that'd be hilarious. That'd be a great skit.
Oh yeah, yeah, and then they could kind of see how it feels like. Well, especially me being English, I don't know if you know much about the English. Football, soccer fans, they like football fans are like incredibly cruel to the players. So, I kind of grew up watching that and I hated it. I hated seeing people kind of judge people based on, the way they play a game, like David Beckham. I remember how badly he was treated just for making one mistake that, I could have seen any of us making. But that's I'm so glad to hear you say that as making people kind of feel good about who they are and what they do. And, we mentioned failure, and you mentioned about having guilt and things like that. Do you find that there is kind of a bit of a transition time with when people come in to kind of learning how to deal with failure, learning how to kind of compartmentalize things, learning that they have to be kind of at peace with who they are? Is there kind of a bit of a growing stage for a new player coming in?
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, you're talking about kids who are, they haven't failed, right? So most of the players that we get into our system are highly talented and been highly successful wherever they were before they came to us. So absolutely, there's certainly a transition period. You kind of have to learn how to, you use the exact right word, compartmentalize. This is what happened over here. And that's just that's just what's happened. And so now how do I process that and grow from it and get better from it? And, that's kind of the way we teach it, is that here we are. If you do have a failure, that's going to be inevitable, first of all. But second of all, there isn't any meaning behind that. It's just failure. Your job is to figure out how you can learn from that experience and then become better because of it. And once they can do that, then they're off and running.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. And we can maybe revisit that at the end, but I want to make sure we get to these main questions, which are, I want to give you a scenario. Someone has a big race coming up in 3 months. I don't know if you yourself race anymore, but kind of you can obviously think about the steps that you might take with some players or just some of the mental skills that people need to kind of have in their toolkit. But what should listeners be doing mentally to prepare for the race? And maybe if you could give 2 to 3 things they could work on in a 3-month period before a big event is coming.
Yeah, well, the big thing I think is that you have your training plan written down and written out, right? So day by day what you're going to be addressing. If you take 3 months, that's a ton of time. I mean, that's marathon training, right? So that's, hey, what's my end goal? And then what am I doing on a day-to-day basis? The other thing I do too, that I always encourage people to do on their runs, especially if they're doing marathons or half marathons, so like significant distances, maybe even, the 50-mile pieces or whatever, is to really embrace the days that suck, right? So if I'm out there and it just sucks today, it's heavy, it's 85 degrees and humid, and I'm just slogging through this thing, like, yes, because you know what? That's how I'm going to feel the last 2 or 3 miles of my race. So here I am. Let's put that in my mind. Let's really embrace this. This sucks right now. Good. I'm going to be able to figure out how I'm going to feel and how I'm going to think when this hits me at mile 20, mile 22, whatever it might be, because it's going to hit you, right? Nobody breezes through those marathons. There's always that moment where you get punched in the face. So how are you going to deal with it? So embrace those times. So if I'm out there for 3 months and I got a 3-month training, number one, make sure the things are written down, have my weekly plans laid out, and know that I'm going to be flexible on those too. Yes, try and adhere to it as much as possible. Yeah, but life happens, and there's things that are going to happen that are going to take you out of that 10-miler on Wednesday. Okay, no worries. We'll make it up later. There's going to still be time, adjust it. Hey, so I can only get out for 6 that day. Great, I still got it in. Things of that nature. And then embrace the suck. Embrace the times where it's really, really, really difficult, and learn from those moments and kind of train yourselves in those moments. This is really tough. This is what's going to feel like at mile 24. This is what's going to feel like at mile 22. Great. Now I know how to get through it.
So should you be kind of paying attention to the things that you're telling yourself in those runs to be like, okay, this is what I could tell myself, and then maybe think of a way to combat that, or a question you could or remind yourself of something? Should you be kind of preparing how to deal with those, or just literally kind of making it worse?
Yeah, well, we talked about being mindful earlier, right? So it's like just being mindful of what's going on. So if I'm having those days where it's just, and it's going to happen, physiology happens, right? Where you're just worn down one day and you're out there and you're just fighting through it. And in those days, just like, first of all, don't give in to that, right? Because that's, I feel like crap today. Oh, right. That's a judgment in your brain. That is an interpretation of the signals that are being fired off from your body to protect you. Right. That's it. That's all they are, is signals being fired off into your brain. And now you're making a judgment on it. So guess what? If you're making a judgment on it, you can make a different judgment on it too. So understanding, hey, I'm mindful. This is how I feel today. Okay, great. So what am I going to do with that? Well, I still have to get through the run. Let's push through this run. And now let's think in a different way. Maybe I think about my form that day. Maybe I pull my elbows in a little bit more. Maybe I stand a little bit taller. Maybe I just think about how I'm going to, think about things as I go through my longer runs in the future, all of that stuff. So I think is the big answer is that, be mindful of it, understand that it's going to happen. And when it does happen, use it for your benefit versus giving into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then what about, it's maybe a few weeks out from the race. Someone is starting to panic. They feel like they aren't where they should be right now. I don't feel like I'm going to be able to make it. It seems too big. Am I even going to be able to finish? How am I ever going to run fast? All those kind of crazy questions that start to come in when you should be feeling good about yourself.
Yeah. That's where you got to go back to process and plans, right? So what is my process going to be for this run? Mm-hmm. What are my thoughts going? I remember I did a half marathon a number of years ago, and I wasn't in the greatest shape. But what I did is I just wrote on a card. I just wrote down, and then I laminated the card and I kept it in my back pocket. I wrote down one thought for every mile. What was my thought going to be that mile?
So what you were thinking ahead of time, what you were going to think about, or this you looked back on?
Exactly.
Okay.
No. This was I had it in my pocket before I ran the race. I wrote down 13 different positive, powerful statements that I could refresh and say over and over again in my mind as I went into that race. So like mile 1 was, hey, slow and steady, get your pacing, get your feet down, enjoy the fact that there's a great energy around. Mile 8 was, hey, lock into your form. You feel great. You feel awesome. Things are going great. You're halfway through, things like that. Just like little pieces that you could just kind of keep saying to yourself over and over and over again that, could get you away from the potential negative thoughts that could pop into your head at any moment.
Okay, that's good. And did you kind of, obviously what you said right there was quite long with each of the points. Did you kind of have a word to represent it and you'd read through them enough times to kind of memorize it? Or was it you literally would pull it out and be like, what's next?
Yeah,
just for people practically want to actually do this.
I kind of knew them already, but I always pulled it out every mile.
Okay.
Right? Because it was also something to look forward to. Oh, get to mile 7, pull out the mark. Okay, here's mile 7. Pull it out. Let me take a look at it.
That's it. I actually have talked about a similar thing. I call it mental bottles, which is where people take their fuel usually like 5K. I would have each 5K, you get what I called a mental bottle. So you get to that point and then you either represent it to someone. Like I would think of, I always say my sports psychologist is at mile 15 because that's usually the toughest part of a marathon. My strength coach is mile 18 because that's when your form starts to break down. And I would kind of think of a phrase for that 3 miles related to that person.
That's great.
But I kind of did it as like every time I picked up my fuel bottle, that was me switching. So I looked forward to the fuel bottle for multiple reasons. But I'm glad to hear you say that as well. And then anything you would say for them, just what kind of while they're maybe not running, but just kind of, at home, kind of over obsessing over the workouts and the paces that they're running or the things that they're doing.
Yeah, just play it out in your mind, right? So I don't know, a couple of weeks out, you probably know the course by that time. If you don't know the course, there's a great thing called Google Maps and Google Earth, and you can start like looking through it if you want to.
And a lot of races have course previews now on YouTube.
Yeah, so. Perfect. Yeah, so you can just start playing them in your mind. That's what I remember. I ran 2000 New York City Marathon, and I had gotten injured a couple times during training, and it was just like, and I just ran. And I ran that last 10 miles in my head easy 50 times before I ever ran it. So it's like I just knew every step. I knew it all. I knew exactly how, it was going to go in my head ever before I ran a damn thing. So anytime I would get nervous, I would just see myself running through a different part of the park, or I would see myself running through the Bronx, which is always the funniest part of that marathon. Mm-hmm. You go across, it's like he just ran up First Avenue and it was just like he's coughing us out. And you get to the Bronx and there's like one dude standing on the bridge. Hey, welcome to the Bronx, pal. Yeah, go. So funny. I love it.
Haven't had the privilege of that, but someday. And then
gotta run New York. It's the best.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to. So in that scenario, did you think of it all going well, or did you kind of envision things going wrong and overcoming them?
No, I never thought about the wrong, to be completely honest with you. I just saw myself going through all the different the points, I just saw myself going through all the miles markers,
Okay.
I never really thought about what was going to go wrong there. It was kind of crazy. I don't know. I was just really prepared for that race. So
okay. That's just what we hear quite a lot, is that you need to kind of include things going wrong and kind of dealing with them. I don't know. Have you heard of Siri Lindley? She's a triathlete world champion. She talked a lot about visualization, how she visualized this. I think it was either an Ironman, it was Olympic triathlon, and she visualized it every day for a year. And then when something went wrong in the first 2 minutes, she just lost it and ended up finishing near the back because she couldn't handle the fact it wasn't playing out like her visualization. So anyway, that's obviously a different perspective, and that's kind of her experience.
You know what it is, though? I think it's understanding that, okay, I'm prepared enough that whatever goes wrong, I can handle it, right?
Okay.
So maybe it's not visualizing those things, but possibly going, okay, what could go wrong? Let me just kind of make okay, what am I going to do if that occurs?
Yes.
Then it's not even something going wrong; it's just something happening, and then I have a plan to deal with it.
Yep. Okay. Great. Thank you. All right. What about race week? Everyone is feeling really tired, feeling sluggish, excited, but at the same time terrified. What is your suggestion people should be doing in those few days before the race where they're, not really sure if they're nervous or excited?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think, it's always tough, because a lot of times what you do is you end up going to other cities and things of that nature. So there's this almost this itching at the back of your head that you want to go out and explore and see what else is going on. Right. So it's almost like, what I would do is I would just kind of make a plan for after the race. Where am I going to go? What am I going to see? In the day or two,
what am I going to eat?
Day or two post. Yeah. What am I going to eat? Where am I going to go? Start coming up with plans, just kind of occupying your mind a little bit. Mm-hmm. I totally still love the whole visualization piece and just getting a sense of the different parts of the course and things of that nature. I love, going on either a walk around certain areas of it or something of that nature. I know energy conservation is absolutely key, during that last week. Prior, you're tapering, you're kind of getting your legs under you. I think that's the other thing too. A lot of people, I know, I've talked to a lot of people and they kind of freak out during the taper.
Yes.
I'm not running.
Talking about. Yeah.
I'm not running. Right. So it's almost like I remember doing stuff where I would visualize my muscles growing even stronger and getting more powerful because I was resting. I was lying and I was I could see the musculars getting stronger and getting better and healing as I was just lying there and kind of not doing much. Great time to take in movies that last week. Great time.
That's true. Yeah. And there are a lot of them that are motivational and kind of get you in the right mindset. Although I don't know.
Game of Thrones is starting.
Game of Thrones. Oh, yeah. I haven't ever watched that. Although I was just going to say that I know people love listening to Lose Yourself, the Eminem song, but I used to find that made me feel so nervous because it was talking about you got one shot. That it would make me throw up because I'd be well, this is my one shot. So if I get it wrong, then my life is done. So, I don't listen to that anymore because it just makes me feel too nervous. And on that note, okay, we're going to talk about next one is race morning. So I don't know if you were like this, but I know a lot of runners get so nervous. They're almost shaking with nerves. They're feeling so much pressure. They don't want to have wasted all this time they spent training, all the sacrifices, all the things they gave up. What would you tell people if they are someone who has a habit of kind of getting nervous? Because I'm sure your players maybe in the early stages may have, points where they have to deal with nerves or pressure. And what would be your advice based on what you've learned?
Yeah. So quick story, 2001 Big Sur Marathon. You had to take we were, staying in Monterey, and you got to take the bus out to the start line, and it just smelled the only seat left was right next to the bathroom. It just smelled so bad. And I remember just literally puking in my own mouth and just kind of holding it down and not wanting to throw up all over the whole bus because of the nerves that I was having that morning too. So they're very, 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 very natural. Number one, it's very natural to get nervous. Number two, it means you're ready, right? Nerves mean you're ready. Nerves mean that you're going to have a little bit of extra adrenaline. You're going to have a little bit more energy, even though it feels like it's sapping your energy. It's not. What it's doing is it's firing up the system. So nerves and that tension Yeah, I've heard of tons of athletes who have to throw up before they go out and they perform. They're like, oh, I threw up. Okay, now I'm ready. Because they know, like, hey, the nerves are there, right? I'm not suggesting people go throw fingers down the throat or anything like that. Like, no. What I'm saying is that understanding that those feelings, that anxiousness, that nervousness, that you can reframe that into excitement. You can reframe that into, okay, I'm ready. And guess what? If you don't have those nerves, fantastic. You don't have those nerves. Good. You can focus your energy on other things. But if you do have those nerves, which I think is really, really typical, great. That's like, embrace them. Embrace them. I think what happens is a lot of times we fight them. We just are like, oh God, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel this way. And the moment that you kind of switch that and you go, oh, this is awesome. I get to feel this. Because how often do we get to feel that on a daily basis? How often do we get to feel that alive on a daily basis? We don't.
So true.
So here it is. Here I am. I'm nervous. I'm going into a big race. Freaking awesome. Let's go. Embrace it.
That's so true. Thank you. I love that. I love that perspective there. And anything you would say to them about the pressure aspect of that kind of, oh, my family's given a lot for me. I really have to perform today. If I don't, then, whatever, set up some kind of, that'll be such a waste. I'll be a failure. What would you say there?
Well, that's just one perspective, right? So sure, you can kind of take that perspective, but we always look at pressure as a privilege. I mean, we hadn't won the World Series for 108 years, for God's sakes, right? We never looked at it as pressure. We looked at it as an opportunity.
That's so true.
So here's an opportunity to honor my family. Here's an opportunity to honor the work that people that gave into. And again, it's just reframing. It's reframing the thoughts constantly, just taking a different perspective about it, because we get a choice. We get an absolute choice on how to think daily. And so when we take that choice and we use it, yes, negative thoughts are going to pop into our head, right? We think between 60 and 80,000 thoughts a day. 85% to 90% of those are negative. We're wired that way because we grew up as cavemen and we don't want to die. We're wired for survival. We're not wired for thriving. So, right. So, but our job is to recognize that they're just thoughts. And guess who controls the thoughts at the end of the day? We do. So it doesn't matter if you have a negative thought. It matters what you do with that negative thought. So here I have a negative thought. I can change it around and I can turn it into something positive. I could take nerves and tension and put that into I'm ready. I could take pressure and I could turn that into opportunity. We had a phrase, never let the pressure exceed the pleasure. That was one of the phrases that we have written on our walls in Wrigley Field. And so that's real. That's how we look at it. So like, you're out there, you're getting to run a race. You're getting to run a race. You don't have to run a race. Turn your have tos into I get tos, and things start to change.
Yesterday, I finally told you about my new watch that had many people wondering what was the watch that stole my heart away from my 235. And I told you that watch was a Coros Apex. I thought my old watch had everything until I heard people talking about Coros, and I noticed Camille Herron was wearing the Apex, actually, the one I have, for her 24-hour world record-breaking race. I couldn't imagine my GPS watching up for a 24-hour race. That must be some serious battery life you got there. So I got myself a Coros Apex, and friends, I love it. Now, many of you are data and numbers nuts, and you're going to be blown away by the possible combinations for the 5 in-workout display screens. It's insane. It's so interesting to read through them and kind of pick at what you want to have on your screens, especially if you're someone who has to run inside often. This watch actually has a setting that makes it extremely accurate, even on a treadmill. But don't worry, you can still get the distance and time only screen. That's what I have mine on primarily. So if you want to go back to simple, you can. There are so many features on this watch that solved many problems or minor frustrations I had with my previous watch. And it's just sleek and nice, and I just love the look. I went for a white one, and I have it on a very traditional screen during the daily use. And if you go to tinamuir.com/Coros, you can get an additional watch band as a bonus. That's tinamuir.com/COROS. And if you're looking for a new running watch sometime soon, this is absolutely the one I would recommend. And I'm only telling you about it now because I wanted to be certain I did feel that way before I announced about it. You know me, I like to keep things real. So go visit tinamuir.com/Coros for more information.
We had a phrase, never let the pressure exceed the pleasure. That was one of the phrases that we have written on our walls in Wrigley Field. And so that's real. That's how we look at it. So like you're out there, you're getting to run a race. You're getting to run a race. You don't have to run a race. Turn your have tos into I get tos, and things start to change.
I love that so much. And that's so true, because you can pretty much take any negative thought. And you mentioned you are going to have them. It's not like you can never get to a stage where those thoughts don't come in, but you can always have essentially an answer back to it with a positive thing. All right, let's talk about in the race. During a hard patch, let's say you're mile 16 of a marathon, mile 8 of a half, feeling like you have a long way to go, dropping out becomes tempting. What are some things you have for advice for kind of in a rough patch? Or, maybe you could think about a player who's really having a bit of a rough game and, is not sure. I mean, at that point, I think probably the coach would maybe pull them out, but how to get your head back in the game, essentially.
Yeah, so there's a great Winston Churchill quote: when you're going through hell, keep going, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing, right? Is you don't know. You never know, right? The only thing, you don't know how you're going to feel in a mile. How many times have you gone out there and had a run and 2 miles into it, you feel like crap. 6 miles into it, you feel amazing, right? I vividly remember doing some marathon trainings, and I would never feel comfortable before mile 4. Every time I would get out there, I'd run, I'd be like, oh, this is awful. I'm feeling like crap. And then by the time you hit mile 4, boom, everything just kind of got in order. So you don't know what the next mile is going to hold. Number one. Number two is focus on something else other than how you feel, right? Like we talked about earlier, feelings are just an interpretation of signals from the body that are meant to keep you alive and help you survive rather than thrive. So you can interpret anything you want, any feelings the way you want to interpret them. So rather than giving into that, start kind of changing in your mind how you're looking at the situation. Start changing what you're saying to yourself. Start looking around, finding things that are good around you. If you're at mile 8 of a race, you're probably in a pretty populated area, or they're a pretty beautiful area, usually halfway through the races when there's really cool things to look at. So start looking outside of your body, start finding fun things, start getting out of your own head. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
That's where also the phrasing and having a good plan for how you're going to think every mile can really help out. I get to mile 16 and maybe my phrase is, head up, shoulders back, I feel great, right? Maybe that's a phrase that I'm saying to myself. And if I'm saying that over and over and over and over and over again, guess what doesn't have a chance to get in? The negative thoughts and how bad I feel. So it's a little bit of that too. Yeah,
I think that's the same thing with when people say about counting steps. It doesn't give you a chance to kind of think about anything else, because you get like in a rhythm of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it doesn't really give you that chance. I know the world record in the marathon, the women's marathon, she said she would count to 300 over and over again. And that's how she distracted herself. But I love that. All right. So let's talk about 2 scenarios after the race. So firstly, everything's gone really well. But maybe the Cubs had this when you won the World Series after, that long of a stretch without people feeling a little bit lost, not sure where to go now that goal is complete, feeling a bit down, like what now, realizing nothing has changed. Your life is, you're still the same person just because you've accomplished that goal. If someone's feeling a bit lost after the race, what would you say?
I think, first of all, like the reason that we do this stuff it's never about the outcome. Yeah, that's always a driving force. But the real beauty, we always used to talk about the marathon being the celebration. The marathon is the celebration of all the training. And so the training is really that's what you're really doing. You're a professional trainer. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, that's why I always looked at like big runs is that, okay, at the end of it, this is a celebration. This is awesome. And just appreciate it. Appreciate it for this moment right now. I think nostalgia is a very, very scary thing. But where you kind of just, you're like looking back, oh, I wish I felt like that again. I wish I felt like that. But just embrace it. Embrace the feeling of doing what you set out to do. And then kind of giving it a little bit of power, right? Like, hey, I accomplished this. I set myself up. I set a goal. I went out and I got it. How great is that? Good. That's awesome. Just appreciate that. Now, naturally, we're human beings and we're going to want to get into what's next. So that can be the next thing, like kind of almost set a time frame for yourself. Like give yourself, hey, I'm going to take 2 weeks after this race and I'm not going to think about another race. I'm just going to just enjoy the 2 weeks. I'm really going to embrace it. And then if I want to go do that and then if I want to go do something else after that, great. Then I'll go do something else after that. But give myself like a week or 2 weeks just to kind of mellow out, just embrace, like I said, enjoy it, enjoy the celebration of the accomplishment.
I think that's true.
I think ultimately too, like, somebody once told me you're either running towards something or you're running away from something, right? Like at runners, that's like kind of how we are. But if you can get away from that, and if you can just run the run, if you can just run to be in that moment, then that's a great feeling too. So you're not running towards anything, you're not running away from anything, you're just running. There's a lot of beauty in that as well.
I think that's true. And I do feel sometimes people kind of rush back into signing up for another race to try and fill that void. But instead, if you can take the opportunity to just kind of, like Josh said, just be, kind of appreciate what you've done and even just take some time to think about what you want next rather than just rushing into something just for the sake of rushing into it. I think that might actually feel better in the long run, even though it might be uncomfortable, for a few minutes there. All right. And what about a bad race? Someone looking back feel like they mentally gave up. They're feeling depressed as everyone else is saying, how you mentioned social media earlier, how amazing their races went. They feel like once again, they've failed. What now?
Again, failure is never fatal. Failure is never final, neither is success. And so you just learn, just use that opportunity to learn. Okay. Why did I have a bad race? What was it? Was it something in my preparation? Do I need to refocus my preparation, do my preparation different? Was it my mindset going into it? Did I not get enough rest? Did I not hydrate right? Did I not eat well? Like, just really look at it and be almost kind of like, okay, what are the clues, right? So I finished this race. It didn't go as well as I wanted to. Well, that's just like feedback for me. It's not a definition of me. It's just feedback. And I think that's a big key, is a lot of times, we talked about it earlier, the separation of the self and the player, right? You happen to run. That is not who you are, right? A lot of people say, I'm a runner. No, you're not. You're a human being who happens to run.
Yes.
That's who you are. And so looking at it from that perspective can maybe shift kind of maybe your focus a little bit. Okay, you had a bad race. I guess what? There's probably still people getting blown up in Iraq, right? So, I mean, that's real, right? It's not a lot of times, yes, some races and some things do have a major impact on societies and things of that nature. But ultimately, for most of us, when we have a bad race, it doesn't really matter in the whole big scope of the world. So take a step back, take a breath. Don't make it mean you're a bad person. It means you had a bad race. This moment happened. Now learn from it and grow from it. It's just an opportunity to get better.
And this is a bit of a side shoot, but a sport like running, you could do it like you did from 5th grade all the way up to, if you wanted to do it, there's people over 100 years old running.
Yep. Do
you kind of see a difference in the way that running, we have that ability to be able to do it our entire lives, whereas a sport like baseball, surely you get that small win. You might play a bit before, you might play professionally or play at a high level, but then after that, you might maybe mentally be able to handle playing, a bit of fun with some friends, but that I would imagine that's quite tough to do for your ego. But then even after that, you kind of get a point where you're done. So it's a very small window, whereas running is, you can do it your whole life. Have you thought about that a lot? Like just the ability to be able to run for life?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I have completed 3 marathons, one of which I was actually officially, I actually had a number for. The other 2 I didn't. I just kind of ran them. But
dear, you might be in trouble.
Yeah,
that's a very, very touchy subject right now.
It was pre-2000. Don't even worry about it.
Okay.
So the thing is, it's like, I can't train for a marathon anymore. I probably could, right? But it would take so much physical therapy, and it would take so many massages and like maybe like bone grafts and like all this stuff, right? I've had 2 meniscus surgeries. It's just like, in order to do that, I would have to change my whole, like I could do it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You could do it on the elliptical. You could do it this way. You could do it that way. But it would take so much more in order for me to be able to do that. So I don't get to run as much as I used to get to run. I can't run 5 days a week without something kind of like snapping or breaking or me being out for 3 weeks. So, there is an appreciation for every time I do get out to go running. I go out maybe 3-4 times a week max. And it's great. Like every time I get out there, I'm really, really excited. I've done a lot more yoga. I've done a lot more of the other things. We see it in baseball, certainly, that there is a transition. There is a difficult transition from being a highly competitive athlete to not all of a sudden. A lot of guys I know get into, like one of actually my staff. He finished his playing career and he got into jiu-jitsu. He loves jiu-jitsu now. So it's a really thing. But yeah, I think, anyway, that is kind of an interesting thought process about the fact that you can run for a really, 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 really long time. And I think every time you do get out to run, though, they're definitely, if you can appreciate it, it makes it that much more powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so just to wrap up with these questions, I did see you wrote an article for Medium with 3 keys to setting goals. And I wanted to just have you give us some advice about setting goals. It doesn't have to be those 3 things. It could just be what you would like to remind listeners about setting goals for their running and then beyond their running in their lives.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is with goal setting is don't be gray with them. Be really black or white, right? Did I achieve it? Did I not? Because when you're gray, then there's no chance to grow.
What would be an example of a gray goal?
Have a great run.
Yeah, or I want to be better.
Yeah, just be better, right? So with running, I think it's black and white goals are pretty easy. Times, boom. Here's what I want to achieve in this race. Number 2, make sure that you have a ton of process goals too. So I think the black and white goal is the one goal that kind of can lead you. It's like, where the end of the race is kind of deal. But then how do I get there? Those are way more important than the end goal. So say you say, I want to run a marathon and, average 7:30s for the marathon. I'm not very good at math, so I don't know what that turns out to be. But then you have to look back at your training and see how that would break down, right? So what do I need to do? How many times a week do I need to train? And then you can have black and white goals within your training. Was I able to put in 60 miles this week? Was I able to do these, repeats? Was I able to do these hill workouts? And then you can put those in there as well. And then it can play backwards. And then also to have mental goals as well. Have a way of thinking, have black and white goals with thinking. Did I say positive things to myself every single mile? Did I, was I visualizing, 5 times before the race? Do I practice meditation 6 times a week? Things like that.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Okay. So is there anything else you would like to tell our listeners based on what you have learned working with professional athletes and just through yourself as being a runner? As kind of staying in it when it can be tough is difficult. So anything else you'd like to wrap up and tell people?
No, I think just kind of hitting on all the themes that we've already talked about, going from, I think the biggest thing that we really talked about was just that you have a choice. Mm-hmm. You have a choice about how to think about any situation. The situations are going to be the situations, and it's always your choice on how you approach those and deal with those. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing is, you are going to have negative thoughts. They're just going to pop into your head. So what do you do with them? Do you make yourself even more wrong? Do you get yourself even more upset because I had a negative thought? No, you just deal with it. Here it is. It came my way. How am I going to handle this? Okay. And then you move through it. So those are the 2 big things I would love to kind of pass on. Yeah,
no, that's really helpful. And finally, with goals, this was what I was going to ask you. Do you believe in having a timeline for a goal? Like your big.
Yes and no. Let's put it that way. It kind of depends. I think it depends on what the goal is, right? Okay. Like I think it's just got to be realistic, right? So realistic but challenging. So like if I was going to say, hey, I want to run, 3 marathons this year, right? It wouldn't work for me just based on my schedule, based on, the amount of times I'm on planes, based on my body, those types of things. But if I say I want to run 3 marathons, boom, then I don't know. It's a tough question because you want something to kind of push you, and you don't want to have like this endless length of time to get things done, but you also don't want to put on a ton of pressure on yourself for no reason whatsoever. Right. Because I see you put, I got to do it. And then it goes from I get to I have to.
Yes.
Sometimes.
And that's kind of where it's going. Yeah.
So it's, you just got to be a little bit flexible with it.
Okay. Yeah, because that's kind of, I think, something that I know a lot of listeners struggle with is, usually I want to run a Boston qualifier, which is a particular time, but kind of feeling like it has to be today, rather than saying, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. I don't know if it's going to be this year, next year, when I'm in my 60s and I'm getting it in my age group, like whatever. And I feel like that's where a lot of runners get themselves into trouble. So I was curious to hear what you said there with goals, but I think you're right. It does depend on what the goal is. And like you said, you have to have something that's tempting enough to want to keep working towards it. So
it depends on the person too, Tina. Some people really thrive under that stuff, and some people, everybody's an individual. So it kind of really depends on the person.
Yep. Okay. All right, Josh, just 4 more questions for you, starting with, what do you tell yourself on the start line of a race or before you're going out to kind of give a motivational speak, something like that? What would you say?
So those are 2 really different things. If I'm going to go out and I'm going to be in front of 2,000 people talking or something like that, for me, I'm always like, take care of the audience. So that's a completely different thing. If I'm at a race, my thought process was whatever I decided it was going to be for the first mile of that race. So it might very well just be about, my pacing. It might be about get out comfortable. It might be about, hey, I'm going to sprint to, that particular telephone pole or whatever it might be, but it's really plan oriented versus anything else.
Okay. All right. And what about one piece of advice for life?
One piece of advice for life: laugh at yourself. I think would be a good one. Learn how to laugh at yourself, because we're going to screw up all over the place, left and right. Every single one of us will. Perfection is fatal, to be completely honest. We have a phrase in the Cubs: be present, not perfect, right? Because you're going to screw up. But as long as you can just stay in the moment and you can be present and be where your feet are, chances are you're going to come out of it better.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. One person to follow on social media. Maybe it doesn't have to be a runner, but maybe someone that some people listening can learn from, be inspired by.
Yeah. Justin Sua is he's a good friend of mine. He worked with me at IMG Academy, and then he worked with the Boston Red Sox, and now he works with the Tampa Rays and the Cleveland Browns. But he's fantastic to follow.
He's also on this show in a few days, so you will get to listen.
Oh, is he?
Justin.
You're just stalking the Sarasota Bradenton area for mental skills coaches. It's awesome.
No, it was actually you're involved in a summit that I saw that had a lot of very high level people. So the power of positive thinking. John Gordon, was it? I think.
Yeah, John Gordon. Sure.
Yep, that was how I found you both, and you two I found together on that. So okay, well, great. That's a double thing for people to go follow Justin. All right. And finally, how do you want to be remembered on this show?
Positive, encouraging, and just like fun.
Mm-hmm. And probably lives the dream job for many people listening. Okay. How can people find out more about you? How can they follow along with you in the future, Josh?
Sure. Twitter is Lifrak Attack, LIFRAKATTACK. At twitter.com, obviously. And then I have a website, joshualifrak.com. So you can go on there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your advice, your wisdom, and just, being fun with us. I really appreciate it and enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks for seeking me out. I appreciate it.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast. Or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. I love that Josh and his team were all about making us better human beings first. I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in our performance that we tend to forget that if we're not happy in life, we're not going to be able to perform. We need to feel good about who we are first. I hope that episode was helpful for you. As I mentioned in the intro, I'll be giving those same questions to 4 more guests this week. So be ready for more tactics and advice in the rest of the episodes this week. And go subscribe if you haven't already. You can find links to everything we talked about today in the show notes, as well as links to get yourself some athletic greens and a Koro's watch. Thank you to both of those for supporting me. And to you for purchasing the products that I recommend on this podcast. That also supports me too. It shows these brands that me working with them is worth their investment. So thank you for supporting me. It means the world. Tomorrow we have motivational speaker Ross Bernstein on the show. Ross has authored a lot of motivational books and is an avid runner himself. Although like you, he often downplays his running. So you may have more in common with him than you think. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, now is a good time to go do so. I have one of my favorite podcasts of all time coming later this week. So be sure you do not want to miss that one. See if you can guess which guest it's going to be. Until then, I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.